We have gone through a lot of villains on this channel, especially through Sinister Six type videos. I even went through one with the world's finest, other villains that Batman and Superman could fight, who aren't just always Joker and Lex Luthor. I wanted to bridge the gap between DC and Marvel once again, and I'm going to do that same type of idea. Two villains that Batman and Spider-Man would have to go up against. What are some villains that would make great team-ups to go against this particular duo? Since Batman and Spider-Man do arguably have the best rogues gallery in all of comic book history, there is bound to be so many different villain variation team-ups we could get from both their respective villains. The first villain team-ups, I have Clayface and Sandman. This team-up would be crazy deadly at the very least when it comes to power. I could see a situation where Sandman and Clayface could even mold together to create some sort of sand-clay variation. You potentially have two characters here who are villains not for any specific real villainy, but just because they found themselves in a situation where they've had to act out as a villain. And as time has passed, maybe they have decided that being a villain is truthfully their calling and that maybe they should just embrace it. Sandman alone for Spider-Man can already be tough. Clayface alone for Batman can already be tough. I'm sure if you put the scientific minds of Bruce and Peter together, they would be able to find some sort of scientific way to make sure Clayface and Sandman could not use their powers to the fullest. Regardless, I do think that this team up has the potential of being the strongest elemental powers they might have to go up against. Then I have Bane and Kraven, two characters that Batman and Spider-Man have had their problems with over the past, and two characters who have physically been able to match up against these respective heroes. The pure intelligence of battleground and strategy that Bane brings to the table, along with the fact that Kraven can pretty much hunt any target he ever so wishes, these two characters working together would be no joke for Batman and Spider-Man. I do also believe that Kraven would take a really big interest in Batman and would relish this opportunity to hunt the Caped Crusader. Whereas Bane, I think he would also be interested in the idea of potentially breaking the spider. Bane and Kraven are not afraid to get their hands dirty. This battle would be violent and gritty. There would be no punches held back, and realistically at the end of the day, it is because both Batman and Spider-Man in this situation would actually be fighting for their own survival. Now I have Penguin and Kingpin. With Kingpin, I think there are a couple of characters you could have chosen to go alongside with him, and I also did consider Black Mask, but I think Penguin is the best fit for this. I think there's a nice contrast, Kingpin literally being huge and super strong, whereas Penguin being a lot smaller than him and maybe in a sense a little more feeble when it comes to power output. Regardless, both of these characters are pure monsters in the underworld crime organizations. One of these guys alone would be able to put a chokehold on the city of their choosing, but both of them together, they would be able to put New York or Gotham into a lockdown run by their own crime families. If both DC and Marvel were merged in some sort of way, you could have some sort of storyline where the Cobblepots and the Fisks have been intertwined with one another before. Maybe they have had dealings with other crime families like the Maroonis or the Falcones over time. And there's a couple of really fun dynamics here too. With Penguin and Spider-Man, Penguin would feel a more or less Nightwing type of presence to him, and that's probably why he wouldn't like him as much. And then with Kingpin and Batman, I'm sure Kingpin would feel a relation to Daredevil. Almost as if what Batman stands for or the way he operates, Kingpin feels as if he's experienced that before. Penguin and Kingpin are ruthless men willing to do whatever they have to do to obtain the power that they specifically want, and I wouldn't even be surprised if there is something in this particular story where they would even turn on one another eventually. Next up is Scarecrow and Scorpion. I love the Scarecrow toxin just because of how much mental destruction it can cause to its opponents. So my biggest selling point about this team up, Scorpion's poison is extremely deadly, and I'm not too versed on experiences of his poison in comic books, but I mean, let alone look what it did to Spider-Man in the Marvel Spider-Man game, the first one. Imagine what Scorpion's poison would look like with a little bit of a dosage of the Scarecrow toxin. That would be a wild trip, super terrifying, and would probably cause someone to die a lot quicker than it usually would. I think it would be a really great opportunity for Spider-Man to face against his fears more than he usually might, so that now he can fully understand what Batman has to go through in his rogues gallery when you literally have people who are willing not to just defeat you in battle, but to literally tear down everything about your own human existence and make you question everything around yourself. And then for Batman to go up against Scorpion, he would also be able to see just how physically strong and physically capable a lot of Spider-Man's villains tend to be, and why Spider-Man might always be so tired all of the time. I think these two villains would be a great outlook for both of these two heroes to really be able to see inside the worlds of their respective lives, to see just exactly who they have to face up against almost every day, and how they would handle those particular villains when they haven't done so before. Then I actually have Joker and Mysterio. I know usually you would look at Joker and Green Goblin and Scarecrow and Mysterio, but I wanted to change it up a little bit. I think Joker would be very interested in the abilities that Mysterio has, especially with the hallucinations and almost the worlds inside of those hallucinations that he's capable of creating. Joker would also really like it because in a very strange sense, that's already how Joker sees the world. Very colorful, very poppy, very energetic, and almost lacking any sense whatsoever. Joker would perhaps be able to maneuver Mysterio's hallucinations better than anyone ever has, because that is just how twisted Joker's mind is. He's capable of understanding what other people don't. I could almost see Joker creating some sort of manifestation of Joker's Funland inside of Mysterio's hallucinations, and how Batman and Spider-Man would maneuver not only the powerful hallucinations and magician type powers of Mysterio, but now the twisted ideas of the Joker along with it. That would be very fascinating. I could see something happening where Mysterio is essentially saying to himself that he no longer wants to be part of this team up because Joker is just taking things way too far. He's a wild card. He's far too unhinged. And Joker is just simply sticking along this partnership for as long as he can until he can find a way to steal the technology or simply the skills that Mysterio uses to create these masterful hallucinations that do indeed look so real. I do think the exotic and the chaotic powers that Mysterio offers fits the bill of Joker tremendously, and it is something he would perfectly want to utilize. Now, speaking of doing something a little bit different, that's exactly what I did here. I actually decided to go with Calendar Man and Chameleon. This would be a huge murder mystery investigation that would make Batman feel right at home, but it would also require Spider-Man to do some investigative work, something he might not do nearly as much as Batman. I just have this story in mind where Batman and Spider-Man continue to visit Calendar Man in Arkham Asylum, and he keeps describing murders that have not happened yet, but he gives specific days where it does happen. And then that day comes, the location, the victim, the weapon in use, the environments, everything, it all lines up with exactly what Calendar Man says. Eventually, they do find the murder suspects, they arrest them all, but every single one of them claim that they didn't do it. And eventually what you would just find out it is Chameleon working with Calendar Man, wearing the faces of different people, murdering these particular targets so that Chameleon is never found to actually be the one doing it. And of course, the days that these people are killed on, the people being killed, the people being falsely accused, why they're doing this would all add up to one massive goal in the end. But I think this would be an awesome villainous team to see, and you could even make this as in depth as something like a Long Halloween type of a story. Next is Man-Bat and Venom, another group of characters that I wanted to change things up just a little bit as well. I personally think if the symbiote saw this massive bat-like creature roaming around the skies of Gotham City, it would want that as its next host. Could you imagine what a venomized Man-Bat would look like, how deadly he'd become, and how powerful he would be? Just the monstrous and sinister look that Man-Bat Venom would carry. And whereas most villain matchups would maybe be these characters having a master plan and the heroes need to stop that master plan, I actually think this one would be more so of a rescue operation, particularly for Kirk Langstrom, because now he's stuck in a situation where, one, he has vampiric bat DNA that he can't control, that makes him turn into a raging monster, and then he's also strapped with the symbiote that he doesn't understand, he doesn't know what it does, and it alters his mood and motivations, and it makes him even more reckless than he usually would be than simply just being regular Man-Bat. This is clearly a man who does need some sort of saving or help, and that is what the driving force of this story would be. And also, let's not forget the very similar friendship that Peter would possibly even have with Kirk Langstrom's Man-Bat when you relate it to Kurt Connor's Lizard. There's going to be a lot of similarities there, and he might know how to handle that personality maybe a bit better than Batman. Now I have Mr. Freeze and Dr. Octopus. I briefly mentioned something about these two characters in the Spider-Man Sinister Six video using only Batman villains. If you guys haven't seen that video yet, link will be in the description below. And I do make some sort of small connection that these characters do feel similar in the fact that their powers and abilities come from maybe accidents, and maybe their motivations might be the closest related as possible. And I think that's exactly where we would go here. Both of their expertise could potentially help one another. They would do everything they can to get to their final goals. It would be all about getting the best technology they could find that would help them with their experiments, and even helping each other with their experiments. Maybe even becoming lab partners and friends that they never knew they could have had back in the day before they became what they became. Realistically though, as much as Batman and Spider-Man would need to get involved in their schemes, I don't think there would be anyone more capable of taking down this team other than literally themselves. Doc Ock's sense of power and control and anger would cloud his judgment, keeping Mr. Freeze from accomplishing anything that he wants. And Mr. Freeze's, yes, also anger, but more so his love for his wife would keep him from letting Doc Ock do what he would want to do, and both of their goals would overshadow the other, and they would likely turn on each other at the end. Another two that I went a little bit differently for here is the Ventriloquist and Tombstone. I think these are two characters who do want more power and control over their particular cities, or at the very least districts within their cities. But I just don't think these characters are big enough or smart enough or maybe even strong enough to be able to hold those titles. Two things here. I do think that the Ventriloquist would actually end up bullying Tombstone, and I don't know how well that would end up working out with Tombstone's temper. I also think that these two characters could maybe be more suited alongside the storyline of Penguin and Kingpin, where the Ventriloquist is like a general of penguins and Tombstone to Kingpin. Either way, no matter how you would choose to craft this particular story, if it's in a bigger one itself or if it is literally its own thing, I think the dynamic between these two characters is what would be the most interesting thing about it. Tombstone knows he can't get the power he wants unless he has a brains behind the organization in Ventriloquist, and Ventriloquist knows their crime reign won't be able to last as long and won't be able to have the power behind it if Tombstone isn't involved. So it's a win-win situation. All right, guys, and then last but not least, and I did go a little bit different for this one as well, I have Owlman and Green Goblin. I know, once again, we always think that it would be Green Goblin and Joker, but I wanted to change it up. And with Owlman, I do understand that he comes from another Earth, but this is just hypothetically speaking if he did belong in the Prime Earth, if you will. This might arguably be the most dangerous team when it comes to planning on the level of a team like Bane and Kraven. Owlman and Green Goblin would be so intelligent on how they particularly want to go after Batman and Spider-Man and how they want to throw them off their guard. They could be 4 or 5 steps ahead at all times. Owlman obviously wanting to ruin the perception of Batman and showing him that the only real way forward is to be a man like him, and Green Goblin wanting to just destroy everything about Spider-Man. Both of these characters can be so calculating and so deadly. I think Batman and Spider-Man could potentially find their match with these two. Owlman and Green Goblin would specifically be targeting their friends and their loved ones, and Batman and Spider-Man would have to put those people into extreme hiding at any cost to make sure they could not find them. This would be an all-around epic battle, anywhere from mind games to physical combat to gadgetary output. This would be something I would really love to see. So there you go, guys. There are 10 sets of villains I would love to see go up against Batman and Spider-Man in some sort of potential crossover series. You guys let me know in the comments below if there are other Batman and Spider-Man villains I did not use, which ones of them would you like to see team up, or what other variations of these characters that I did use that you guys would particularly change to fit a different story. But that is all I have for you on this one, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and until the next time, I will talk to you all very soon.